today we're going to go through the heart center or the ego. So if you have your chart, look at it and see, what it looks like for you. I'm not on my computer because I'm on Alex's, so I'm going to have to figure this out for next time. But before we kind of dive into everything, if you're looking at your chart, what do you guys notice about the ego in general? Not necessarily your particular configuration, but any comments on that, or what are some first observations when you're just looking at a chart and you see the ego?
The ego sucks. I know that.
Okay. All right. Anybody else, even if you don't know anything about the ego, like when you're looking at a chart, what do you notice about it? Like anything?
That it's in their heart space, right? Where the physical heart is.
Yeah. That's good. Yeah. Cool. So I'll give you guys some hints here. It's like the smallest center, right?
Seems to be connected to everything.
Yeah. It connects to different places. It's also, it only has 4 gates, right? So we know that when a center has less gates in it, whether, we're just looking at a chart, not someone's chart, right? Just how the chart is set up. An area that has less gates a lot of times means that it's less likely to be defined, right? Because there's less chances for it to be activated. So already we know from that there's less people in the world, right, that have it defined. So we're going to go through what the traditional or the collective consensus of what ego means. And then we're going to go into the mechanics of it and really describe that. So yeah, only about 1/3 of the population has it defined. Okay. So this is important because we know that the ego can be a place of high conditioning, because in our world, there's so much about okay, you just got to will through everything and push through even when you're tired. And yeah, so 1/3 of the population is defined and 2/3 is undefined in the ego. So you guys can unmute yourselves again. I'm going to ask some questions here. I'll start with Chemo, since you mentioned something about it. When you hear the word ego, what do you think of?
Typical term is, someone that's egotistical, maybe. For me, it's you're really focused on the physical world and react to more physical things, I guess, and satisfying yourself through, physical material possessions, I guess. Okay.
All right. Yeah, there's some good things. I want you guys to note that he used the word material and possessions many times. Okay. So that's good. Sonia, what do you think when you think of the word ego? Oh, you're muted. Sorry.
I think for me, it's willpower. And
okay.
Yeah.
All right.
That's the first thing that comes to me.
Okay. All right. Good. Josefa?
For me, it kind of, the word mask comes up. So a mask that you wear that can be beneficial. I guess you originally develop your ego to help you when you're younger. And then as you get older, it can be a hindrance. But it's like a mask.
Okay. So something maybe that's not even necessarily real. It's kind of like a front or something that you're putting on.
Yeah.
Okay. Good. All right. And Alex?
Self-worth and preservation and drive are what come to me.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So also take note of the word worth and self-preservation. So yes, all of you guys described what kind of the collective and individual disdain is for the ego, right? So there is this feeling on the planet oh, we don't like ego. And it's always important to note that what we're going to go through is the mechanics of ego. It's different than what we're talking about right now. The ego that we're talking about right now is kind of that ego identity, right? I kind of think about it that way. It's not necessarily mechanics of ego. There is distortion that can come in with ego, right? But we have the ego as part of the human experience for a reason, and we're going to go through what that means. And hopefully all of us can kind of redefine this word and use it differently from now on, and understand what it's for, and then be able to recognize distortions and how we can really use it, because it is really important for lots of things. Okay, so yeah, when we first look at it, it kind of looks like it's not as complex. Like when we think of complexity in the human design chart, the throat normally is like the most complex, right? It has the most gates, it's connected to lots of different things, and as we've described in the other videos, that the throat is, the center of communication, and it's also how we manifest, right? And it's like action or communication. Okay, so there's a lot that it does. It's like the town center. But when we look at the ego, it is actually the most complex biologically. Okay, so the ego connects and really kind of dictates different biological systems. It empowers them. And if you remember, we had talked about before the energy centers, or the motors of the chart, right? And so we know that the motors of the chart are the root, the ego, the sacral, and the solar plexus. So it's one of the motors, but it's the tiniest one, right? It's the smallest motor, but it is very powerful nonetheless. So I have an undefined ego. I believe Sonia has a defined ego. Chemo is undefined. Alex is undefined. Alicia's defined. Josepha, you're undefined? I forget. Okay. All right. Whew. Sometimes I remember people's charts, but not all the time. It's weird. I'll remember certain things. Like I believe I know everyone's crosses and different things. But as we can see, there's only 2 people out of the 6 here that have it defined, right? So again, there's that statistic there. So each one of the gates has its own biological function. I'm going to go through those real quick. The 21 is the physical heart. Okay. The 40 is the stomach. The 26 is the thymus gland. And the 51 is the gallbladder. And it's interesting because, as we know, we've talked about like splits and being able to see where there's different points of like tension or where the energy goes in a person's chart. I've seen lots of times in people's charts, depending on the 51, they've had it removed or they have like gallbladder issues. The same with the stomach. I can almost call it like right away, like you have stomach problems, you have ulcers. I've also found that with the 40 that there's a lot of sleep issues, and we'll go through why that is. The 26, as you can see, it's moving over to the spleen. It's empowering the immune system. Okay, so the 26, this thymus gland pumps out T cells, and it reaches over to the 44, which is the B cells. So this is actually a channel of health, right? It's the ego, the willpower, the empowerment of health. In the beginning of the call, I was talking about how there's collective disdain and individual disdain for the ego. The ego is mostly tribal. Okay, tribal is how we navigate the material plane. So that's why chemo, I was like, okay, yeah, you said materially and possession, because that's what the ego is about. It's not an awareness center. It will never be aware. The ego is not aware. It's not. It's a motor. It's a tiny motor. It's about willpower, which is not free will. It's the will to take care of the tribe. It's the will to navigate the material plane. So yeah, it has a lot to do with self-worth, preservation, hopefully not just of self, right? Of the people that we're taking care of, but we do need to take care of ourselves too. Yeah, money, business, families, relationships, universal love, the 51, the gallbladder, connecting through initiation to that 25, right? That's universal love. And even Ross says that if we don't have universal love, then the heart breaks. So this collective and individual disdain for the ego is that false ego, that distortion of ego identity, right? So if we have 1/3 of the population that is designed to prove themselves, right? You see a defined ego, you need to prove yourself by using the will, using the motor to take care of people, to control resources, the 21. The 40, maintaining a community, a connection, a relationship, providing for that. The 26, being the best at something, the salesperson, the marketing person, lifts our morale. And the 51, by being competitive, right? It's the ego of competition. So there's 4 types of ego, right? 21 is control. 40 is, well, I'm the one that's going to do this. I'm going to build the community, the church, the ark, blah, blah, blah. The 26 is, yeah, but I'm the best at that. And so I'll sell it to everybody. And then the 51 is like, well, I'm going to be first. Whatever someone hasn't done, I'm going to go do that, right? The competition. It's either courageous or foolish, right? So these are the 4 main ego identities. So we can even see in our own chart, okay, I have an undefined ego, but for example, I have the 21 and the 26. So you have an undefined ego and you have something in there, let's say. Those would be points that you want to look at to make sure that you're not in a conditioning trying to prove yourself for those things, right? You have to still wait to respond or whatever your strategy is. And your ego is conditioned. The way that it's going to operate is going to be based on how these other people connect to it. And we need to check it. But again, those white areas are the things that we're here to learn about. We become a specialist in, right? So I'm learning a lot about what control is and what being the best is, right? Now, all of these have the binaries. I mean, control, no, I have no control. I'm powerless, right? There's powerlessness in the 21, right? It's in a shadow, like being controlling, but it's a lot about authority, and that there are some people in the hierarchy. In order for us to maintain materially and within a tribe, some people do need to be in control, right? It's controlling in order to distribute. It's the president of the company, where the 45 that connects to it is the owner, the CEO, right? We've talked about this as being the pure manifesting channel, one of the 3 pure manifesting ones, right? We know the other 2 are from the emotional center up to the throat, but this is a direct action manifesting channel that is a lot about money. We've talked about that it's difficult to have the full channel in your chart, but it's great when someone has one side and the other person has the other side, so I have the 21, somebody else has the 45. All right, we can, make some resources to distribute to the people so that we can be safe. We can protect the tribe from the collective, right? Because the collective is homogenizing. We don't want to just assimilate to that shit, right? It's like, fuck that. Even though the collective is not really a real thing, but there's a lot of, as we know, we're all kind of moving towards that. Like the world is moving towards that new world order and the one world crap, right? The tribe and what we've been talking about before too is how do we organize? How do we deal with this? A lot of it is going to have to also come from the ego, right? So we can see that our conditioned feelings around the ego is not really correct, right? Yeah, we don't like that hierarchical, I'm better than you, I'm going to use my ego and take and not give to you. That's what we don't like about the ego, right? It's I'm going to manipulate in order to get something out of this that doesn't help you at all, right? It is all about possession. So whenever you think of ego, it's possession, it's having, right? That 2145, the manifestation of it is, I have this, we have this, I don't have that, we don't have it. Okay, but we have to, or I don't have to, we don't have to, right? So that's how that manifestation works. So, and we'll be going into these gates a lot more in depth as we go, but that's a little bit about the 21. I have the 21.5. And so something about my 21 and my experience of it is that like they say with the 21, you have to be in control of the environments, what you eat, and what you wear. So you can imagine having a child that goes to private school, you know, with a uniform and all these things. It was really difficult for me. And also, you know, if you did have a child that has that, you would want them to be able to control like their room, right? And like, okay, this is your space, and things like that. So it's kind of interesting with that 21. I've been learning a lot about control, how to control resources, feeling powerless sometimes, feeling like, okay, I've got authority in this. I don't have authority in that. And again, it's always configuration based on like the other people or the situation. So it's pretty interesting. Yeah, so let's move to the 26. The 26 is the taming power of the great. I don't know if you guys remember, but last week I talked about the taming power of the small, right? With the 9, that's reaching towards the root. But this is the other side. This is the taming power of the great. So this is the great ego, the egoist, right? This is the 26. And they call it like the sacred trickster. I have this one, right? I believe it's a lot about art. I think even in the Gene Keys, Richard Rudd talks about it as the art of invisibility, whereas like the shadow is pride, right? And pride, when we think about it, can be two things. It's either false humility, like I'm not good enough. That's also a form of pride, even though it's like the other side, right? Like, no, I'm not good enough. I'm not going to step up and be the 26, right? Or it's the other side, like, no, I'm better than everybody, right? But the art of invisibility is like being able to kind of manipulate the background to like help others and not even need to like be like, oh yeah, but look at me, I did all that, right? So that's kind of the highest form of this 26. And it's all about transmitting a message. This ego is meant to transmit a message to the tribe. It's part of the channel of transmission, which Sonia, you have this full channel. And we have the 26 part, right? So the 26, they say it's like the gate of enterprise. And I always think this one's kind of interesting because it's like enter to get a prize. And the prize is you don't have to work as much, because the 26 is like, okay, well, I'm just going to be really good at something and then I'm not going to work as much, right? So even Ra talks about how like this is like the salesperson of the team, but the 44 has to call him all the time because the 26 is always at the golf course, just like fucking off. And he's like, come on, we need to get you in here to work. And that's how the 44 works, because it's the talent scout, the manager that gets the ego to come do the work. Please come sell this so that we can all make some money and, you know, help the tribe. So that's the prize, right? The enterprise. It's condensed effort. So you don't have to work as much, right? Normally people at the 26 and the 21 or the 45, depending, can maybe make money, right? Or more money, depending. I mean, there's lots of factors, but it has that mechanism to it. And it's to help support the tribe and the people, right? It's not just to take it all yourself and, you know, screw other people. That's where the sacred trickster of the 26 becomes manipulative in a negative way, because it's the gate of manipulation, but it's being able to manipulate whatever is here, whatever you're trying to sell, in a way that does get the other person to want to buy it, but it's because it is actually good for them, right? That would be the higher frequency of it. Or it can be like the used car salesman that's selling you a piece of crap and now you're screwed. So we can look at it in that like business sense, and then also about health. right? The 26 is meant to protect us. The T cells are the cells in the body that go out and attack all the stuff that's not good for us, right? That's part of that immune system response. So the ego is also about keeping us protected, keeping us together. That's a positive attribute of ego, right? So having an undefined ego myself, and when I first started learning about this stuff, it was difficult for me to be around certain egos, like certain defined egos that would like compromise my gates, right? So I have a 21 and 26. The person had the full channel there. I would notice that like sometimes it was difficult for me, especially with that 2145. I still actually have a lot of issues dealing with people who have that full channel. I have friends that have that. There's nothing wrong. But it compromises my 21 in a way that, maybe I'm still working on it. I don't know. But it would be hard for me to control my own resources, right? Control what I have and then be like, wait a second, that person's ran off all my stuff, kind of thing. For me with my 26 has been interesting because, the ego identity, the mind self-talk, just with me having the 26, a lot of times, like I have not wanted to show my, my skills or how good I am at something. A lot of times it's actually taken me a long time, throughout my life to be like, okay, I can do my skills and not have to be, prideful about it, because I would have that like false humility type of like, I'm not good enough. Like if I'm not the best, I'm not going to do it, or I'm not going to show it, right? Because I'm not perfect. Like I'm not the best. And the thing about the 26 is that there's always people that are better than you at it, right? And for me, it was like this weird thing. I didn't ever want to feel like I was trying to be the best either. Like I had a lot of intolerance with that ego energy, right? Like that, like, oh, I gotta, I don't really like that. I like being competitive, but not in a way that's, I guess, fucked up, so I don't know. And maybe it's because I swing more towards the other side, like, oh, maybe I shouldn't like try to, be that way or whatever. And that's probably my own ego too, right? There's ego around not having ego. It's fucked up. So yeah, that's been interesting. And then, like I said, with my 21, the powerlessness, even though I have the 21, right? And it's a 0.5, which is like projected on, right? 0.5s people project onto you that gate, right? So I had the 21.5 and it's like, oh, I'm getting the opportunities of being in control of things. And then I'm like, oh no, I feel powerless, right? Or I don't feel like I'm the best. So maybe I shouldn't do this or that, or fear that people are going to think I'm egoic, so I wouldn't do stuff. But over the years of kind of working with this, just seeing that feedback system that we've talked about, where you have a white center, and then like you can feel when it gets activated by other things. So watching that come out, like watching how my ego would come out around certain situations. And there was a guy in Costa Rica that studied under Ra for like 20 years. He was an ego projector. And I always remembered like it was really off-putting to me when he would come up to me and he'd be like, oh, you're just trying to prove yourself, because I had a nonprofit. I started a nonprofit, and yeah, I was probably trying to prove myself in some way, but I was trying to build communities and doing all these things. And I remember I felt like really kind of like just off by that. But looking back, I'm like, okay, yeah, maybe I was subconsciously trying to prove something even to myself, right? Like I have value, I have worth, I'm morally just because I'm dedicating my life to this and that. So I've had to work through a lot of layers and, going below the motivations, like why am I doing this? And especially with where I'm at now, I still have a lot of issues with certain things I do in my life. Like the dance thing, I don't know if you guys know this, but I was doing like being a dance teacher for like ballroom and Latin. And that whole industry is very like flashy, showy, ego. And that's not really what attracted me. I just like to dance, and yeah, it's fun to dance and like feel like you're doing it good and all that. But like I'm having a hard time even getting back into it because I'm like, I don't want to do things that are driven by that, like, whoa, look at me. I don't know, it might just be my own ego configuration, but that's kind of where I'm at with certain things with the ego now. And I don't know, it's just happening a lot with a lot of different things in my life where I'm like, why the fuck am I even doing this? Like, what do I have to prove? Like, fuck it. Like, I don't care anymore. So that's just where I'm at with it. And it's cool. And just kind of seeing the intolerance that I had to ego and weeding that out too, because I had so much intolerance to other people, even, oh, like, look at them. They're just like, you know, trying to be the best at this or trying to be however. And so I would have like my own reflections back around ego. Right. And so even that was all distorted, and just trying to clear that out and just like watching whatever comes up. Like, okay, it's totally cool for people to do Latin ballroom dancing and to, you know, go out there and show how good they are at that. Like that's fine, you know. And just being more in that like awareness space of it, because having an undefined ego, we're here to learn about what ego is, right? So people have it undefined can see, okay, like the gift is, all right, I can see what their intention is. I can see if they're actually going to do what they say they're going to do, which only defined ego people should kind of carry that energy, right? The I will do that, right? That's only for defined people. If people that are undefined say I will, well, I will do this and I will do that and then I will do that, it's not healthy. So it is the most complex biologically, right? So those biological functions can get damaged, right? So the heart, the gallbladder, so you can see it in a chart, right? Like what could be happening, the immune system or the stomach. But even if it is defined, it can also damage those particular areas in the body. And because if the ego switches over to that, like overinflated, or you have a defined ego and you're not using it, right? That's the other thing that I've noticed. We know defined egos are here to prove themselves, right? It's like another gas tank in the vehicle. When we're out of gas, we're out of fuel, and we're like, okay, I'm going to take a break. The ego can say, well, I've got a NOS button and I'm just going to keep going. You know, so sometimes people that have a defined ego don't use the NOS button, or they're on that other side of the ego where it's like, I don't have the power. I'm not good enough. You know, issues with money, issues with navigating the material plane, issues with relationships, commitments, right? The 40-37. This is the ego that strengthens family. It's the gate of a part seeking a whole. The 40 is the gate of aloneness, the gate of deliverance, the nihilist, the one that denies God. The 37 is the friendship, the tradition, the touch. It's all about touch. It's food, right? We're a happy family if we eat. But if the ego is fucked up and too much, or on the other side, stomach has problems. You get fat, potentially. So yeah, that 40, whenever I see that, it's one of the first things I look at charts. Like there's certain things that I see, which I'm like, oh, gotta mention that first. The 40 is one of them, because it's the NOS button. But sometimes people have it, can think that there's still gas in that tank, even though it's like not even fumes, right? So they're just gonna keep going, keep going, keep going. I actually think of the 40 more like a train. It's the big ego. It can like keep going and plowing through stuff. It's the divine will and the gene keys. But it's a gate of aloneness, right? And it's that stomach. It's I want to do this so that I can rest, right? I'm going to build the ark, but you guys had to go get the animals, and you have to I'm not going to feed everybody, right? I'm going to build the ark, and then you all leave me alone, right? I need to go rest and be alone after this. And so whenever I see the 40, I'm like, okay, our life, right? When we think about digestion, it's not just food. Like our charts are telling us how we digest the neutrinos. So for a 40, First of all, it's healthy for them to say no first, all the time. Just deny, no, no, no. Because the 40 is massaged by the tribe. Oh, you're the best. You're so good at that. Like, can you please build us the ark? Like, no one else will do it. We really need you to do it. So they can get seduced into that even if they don't have gas in the tank, right? They're like, well, okay, I'm going to build this ark even though I'm completely exhausted. Right? The exhaustion is the shadow. So say no first. And whenever they're doing anything which requires them to push that NOS button or to keep going, that ego of like, I'm going to do what I said I'm going to do. This is where that comes from, 40, right? It's that collective conditioning crap, it's societal. No. But for them, okay, well, I committed to this. I'm going to do it, even though I'm exhausted. So they push, 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 and then they crash, right? The train stops, they can't, no more. So anytime they digest anything or they push the NOS button and they need to keep going, they need to see that as like they're digesting very quickly and they need to rest. So they're here to push the NOS button, keep going, and then to rest, right? But if they don't do the rest part, major problems. I didn't read about this, what I'm about to tell you now, but I've noticed it with lots of sessions and personal things I've experienced with the 40, especially if there's a detriment, and especially if it's like the 40.5, right? Someone's projecting onto them, then they are going to be able to push through no matter what. With sleep, this is a sleep problem I've found. And I've asked people who have it, I'm like, do you have sleep issues with this? They're like, how'd you know that? I'm like, well, you have the 40 in detriment, which, again, it's not aware, it's not awareness, but it's the mechanism of when you're tired, keep pushing. So you're trying to go to bed, you're tired, but you keep pushing, right? Or you kind of fall asleep and then wake up and you can't fall back asleep. So I've seen that. I've seen a lot of people that are like on Ambien, and they can't get off, right? They cannot get off of these things. And what I've noticed too is that, if they have like completely open centers or like looking at the configuration, like helping them with the not self stuff, like, okay, this is what you're thinking about, right? This is what's making you push. And even Ra talks about these can be the type of people that drop dead from work, right? You keep pushing, pushing, pushing. And this is the thing, most of us are not designed to push, and to like, oh, I need to keep hitting this wall because what, it's like, because that's actually ego, right? That is ego conditioning to keep pushing. Well, if I just work harder, this will work. No, follow your energy signature, right? Okay, I'm a generator. What's satisfying? Well, this thing over here that I keep pushing on, it's not doing great. I don't want to keep doing that. It's frustrating me. It's degenerating me, right? But this over here is satisfying, even though my mind's like, no, keep pushing, doing that, right? So we see a lot of people, most people, they come into this, it's like, well, they're pushing so hard to go somewhere, to do something, to get something, to whatever their mind came up with. And you can see in their energy signature, oh, you're frustrated, you're drained, you're not self-centered to this and that. And you just got to do this, right? Just kind of go towards this, which is scary, right? It's scary to like, well, if I don't push, if I don't like, what about determination? What about perseverance? What about ambition and drive and all this stuff? That's great. But if you don't enter into something correctly, because this is all about geometry, right? Sacred geometry, trajectory, fractals, timelines, quantum entanglement, all that stuff is about how you enter. So if you don't enter correctly, no amount of pushing, no amount of like false willpower that you have is going to get you there, right? So when we look at determination, sorry, I'm jumping everywhere, but we look at determination as like a mechanic. It's about finding the groove, right? It's something that you get into, you find the groove. It's not push, 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 push. And then all of a sudden you get it, right? So with the 40, they can push, right? They can push more, but it always has to come from invitation, right? It's projected. So this is the channel of marriage or divorce. It's the channel of like whenever you think of the 40-37, yeah, I think of marriage and divorce. I think of stomach, I think of the train, but I also think of the church. It's the church that is passing you over to the priest, which is the 51. It's the shaman, the guru, the the one, the hermit that takes you over the void with a lamp and supposed to set you free into the void so you can find your unique consciousness. But this 4037 keeps saying, yeah, talk to the priest, 51. But you have to go back to the church. That's the 4037. You got to stay committed. We got to keep our traditions, our values, right? That's what this channel is about, depending on the lines, right? 1, 2, 3 is more traditional. 4, 5, and 6, we start to like break traditions, right? Like, I don't know if I want to keep going with what I was raised with. A lot of people have the 4037 had periods of like lots of, dabbling in religion. And depending on that line of the 40, either said, yeah, I'm going to stick to that and like hunker down, because that's the 40 is like, can be committed. Or it's like, no, like I'm not doing that and I don't believe in God anymore. Right. So that can be part of it. But yeah, the marriage and divorce thing is really interesting because the 40 is about commitment. And so is the 37. But it's like almost like an ego commitment too, because the 40 is like, look, I'm going to keep doing what I agreed to. I'll keep building the ark. Okay. You guys came to me, you invited me. I waited my wave, right? Because it's connected to the wave. I waited my wave. I said no first. You guys kept coming. Okay, fine. All right. Well, what's the agreement? The bargain first. It's tribal. It's agreement and bargains, right? We have a lot of distortion around, well, they're my friends, they're my family. I should do it for free, not talk about, agreements. Just do it. Causes problems. That's where the obedience becomes ignoring and rejection. This one is operating through obedience and ignoring. Obey, ignore, obey, ignore. That is the wave. That is actually the wave of the tribal wave. And it's because of agreements. And that's how we need to run families as a business, communities as a business, friendship as a business, right? It's not rude. It's just like, hey, here's what I can do. Here's what you can do. What do you want to do? What should we agree on? Let's share the resources. Let's share what we can do to support each other. Okay, you need people, you need this, that, whatever. So yeah, that 4037 said no, got the invitation. They kept coming. They made the agreement. These other people aren't upholding the agreement. Okay, well, now I'm going to divorce that situation. I'm exhausted. They're not telling me that I'm the best anymore. They're not telling me that I'm the greatest ark builder ever existed. No, I don't want to do with that, right? So the 40 has to have lots of appreciation. Okay, so if you know someone has the 40 or you have the 40, if you're not getting that ego massage, you're not happy. You don't want to do it anymore. You're like, no, I'm not going to do anything for you anymore. I'm withdrawing. I'm going to go be alone. And that's how that operates. So I always think of when people say like, we kind of have this attitude on the planet, like, well, they didn't do what they said they were going to do. Whenever I hear that, I'm kind of like, oh, I hate that program. I really do. Especially now that I've been like honoring my chemistry, because we know when we honor our chemistry ourselves, that timing, that moment of decision, it's about geometry again, right? So sometimes we have to say, no, I know I said I would do this. Sure, we need to still communicate. I don't have as many problems anymore changing plans or just telling people I don't feel like doing this right now. I'm not doing it, right? Which a lot of people have had issues with. Sorry, side note, but that's where this program comes from, is this 40th code, right? So 2/3 of the world cannot do what they say they're going to do. Now, if you have a defined ego, it's a double-edged sword. You have this NOS button, you have this ability to be the best or be the first, be the one in control or be the one that delivers, right? The 40, I'll build the ark. That's great. You get a lot of, ego pump for that. And it makes you feel good. It's healthy for you. But the double-edged sword is that you might believe that everyone should be like that, right? That's where the program in the world comes from. Like everyone should be this way. And like, it's not true. So all of us that don't have the defined ego, we've been clearing out this program of like, I have to prove my value. I have to prove my worth. This is where self-worth comes from, is this ego system. Otherwise, if I don't prove my value, something's going to be taken from me. So what am I going to do? I'm going to make promises. Okay, I will do that. I'm going to go do that. Yeah, I'll do that. And then that. And then we can't do it when the time comes because we don't have the gas tank. Like, shit, I'm tired. I can't do this. I'm okay, but everybody says I got to do what I say I got to do. Okay, I'm going to do it anyways. Now my body's fucked up. Now my system's up, upset. I didn't do it as good as I wanted to. May have given me a little bit of instant gratification, instant ego boost, but it's not part of my design. So it doesn't really satisfy me. And I just harmed myself in order to prove to them that I'm loyal, consistent, better. I'm the best, whatever it is, those things. I'm the best lover. I'm the best. I need to be this and that, right? This is where all the societal programs come in. It's from this, but the double-edged sword for the defined ego is it like not everyone can be like that, right? So we've talked about the defined areas that you have. We also have to be careful with how we deal with people, right? And how they have an undefined area, just like the root. I have a defined root. I need to be careful with my energy around certain people, right? They might feel overwhelmed by this normal energy to me, right? So let me slow down. I did make intense coffee this morning, so sorry. Anyways, I like it. So the same with the ego, right? The double-edged sword is like, look, you might be able to do certain things and that's great. Like, we need you to do it. Right? Like, thank you. Okay. But don't expect other people to uphold their commitments, right? Yes, we want to hold people accountable to communicating, right? But, I think that this is a big problem because people are like, well, I told them that, we would never break up and that we would be together forever and we're soulmates. And they're so nice. I don't want to hurt them. So I'm going to stick in it. Right. Or whatever the case is. Right. I told them I was going to do this or that. And now I'm in it. And my energy is like, it's not letting me do it. Okay. Readjust the agreement. Potentially, or it's just not correct. So that's one thing that I've noticed, having an undefined ego, and like a lesson that I've learned with the defined ego. I can't always do what I say I'm going to do. Okay. Like not all the time. I am going to do my best to try, but I will communicate if I can't. That's the best I can say for that. And doesn't affect my self-worth. Doesn't. So 51, right? Shaman, the priest, the guru, the medicine woman. This is where that all comes from. We talked a little bit about the mystical way, right? The mystical path, right? Which we talked about with the 19 in the root, the pressure to find God, and it goes over to the 49, which is like, okay, we need to make these agreements and we need to develop a church. Okay, it goes to the 3740. Okay, now we all need to pray together, maybe do some ritual sacrifice from that 1949, eat some meat and, pray to the gods and like, wait, we need a leader, 51, right? All right, the shaman, the guru, they're going to heal us. And that is part of the tribe, right? We need healing. We need the doctors, the people that can nurture and care for us. And the 51, whenever I think of it, I imagine a person on a surfboard and the person is like riding electric, like lightning, right? And it's like, oh, fuck, it's shocking, right? The 51 is the gate of shock, agitation, and initiation. My agitation is like the shadow, but it's adaptation, right? It's adapting. It's on the surfboard. Like, yeah, it's cool, shocking, but I can adapt. People out of 51 might say really shocking things. They're supposed to shock you into an initiation. They're initiating you through shock, right? So Ra, I believe, had the 51. He'd say stuff and people were like, holy fuck, like, why do you say it like that? You know, a lot of people don't even like Ra. They're like, I can't listen to him. I get it, but I kind of like it. You know, I'm like, yeah, fuck it. That's just who he is, you know, and that's cool. He had a defined ego as well. So there is that. But yeah, the 51, I also think of like the hermit card, you know, with the guy with the lamp. He's like, all right, come this way to the void. Because this is the bridge, right? We have the church, the 4037. Yeah, we're gonna get married. We're no divorces, hopefully, you know, and like stay together and, you know, get our balance and feed ourselves. And the 51's like, all right, now we did all the praying in the church. What are we gonna find over here? We're the shock into the void. We're gonna take the surfboard on the lightning and go to the 25, you know, which is universal love. Right? It's one of the coordinates, one of the 4 gates of the vessel of love cross. And we know Alex has the Sphinx, which controls direction. And the vessel of love is how we can find love, not just like romantic love, you know, like the whole thing about love on the planet, right? So universal love. This is the only individual channel in the ego. The other 3 were tribal, right? But it's individual in a different way. Per the mechanism, the 51 is like that hermit taking you across the rainbow bridge so you can then free yourself and go find your own thing. But like I said, it normally points you back, you know, to giving your offerings at the church, you know, go back to the 4037. You don't know enough. Don't go across the bridge. You know, you got to go to ceremony twice a week, and everyone looks the same. Everyone dresses the same, you know, smells the same, does the same traditions, because we do need that in a sense. But, you know, I've done a lot of plant medicine. I've done a lot of ceremonies, and this was prior to my Saturn return. And that was the thing. Everyone wears white. You know, everyone wears the beadwork. You use the agua florida, right? The Florida water that smells a certain way. There's very strict traditions, right? It's a ritual for how we can go across the void. But my channels are purely individual, and it's difficult for me over time. It's like, wow, this is like, it's great. I think it's important that we all have to go see the shaman in the group, you know, the person that can help us heal. But if it's not setting you across the bridge and like empowering your unique consciousness, that's the 2010, right? The 2010, the awakening. Then it's just assimilation, homogenization, conditioning, and all that. You know, the tribe is about, we all need to look the same, smell the same, blah, blah, blah. The individual is the weirdo. It's like that they're not like us. Sometimes we'll let an individual in to mix up the diversity in the genes, but the individual is normally an outcast. Right? If you have individuality, which again are those middle channels, right? We have 3 here, right? It's the middle. We have 3, right? The middle ones of those, which we all have that, right? That's where we are like outcasted, but people are attracted to it. So this 2551 is the only individual ego, right? And it's about being shocking. It's about, you know, it's projected, right? It's just a motor to the G center. It's not connected to the sacral, right? It's an empowerment of self, right? It's energy to universal love, manifestation of universal love, right? But this initiation has to be invited, right? You cannot just go up to someone, hey, I'm going to initiate you, right? It has to be invited. And it's that ego energy. All right, so that's the gallbladder, the gall, the courage or not. You know, stand on the surfboard, just go through it. 25 is all about innocence, right? It's like, I don't know, I just was thrown into this void, right? That's how we can actually have universal love on the planet. Realizing everyone is actually innocent, right? We're all just kind of like thrown into this. Yeah. I believe it's also the constriction in the gene keys is the shadow. It's like the wound, the wounding, right? Wounding of humanity, right? That wound, constriction that we have on us, right? That like our innocence was robbed, even from the religious crap. You know, it still came with us from the church. Like, oh, you're going to hell, right? Because you're not pure. No. So, all right. Couple key points. If you have an undefined ego, never make a promise. That's like one of the first things I always say. Don't make promises. You cannot will yourself to do something, right? Doesn't happen. Any self-worth stuff that you feel, if you have an undefined ego, is all conditioned, right? You're already worthy. You don't have to prove it. Just be yourself. You know, and the more and more we can unwind that. And like I was saying, there's like those, it's like feedback loops and like so many layers to it. You know, the undefined egos, we need to be more tolerant of ego and like seeing it for what it is. And like when we see it in a healthy way, to like really support it too, and be grateful for it. You know, the defined egos, thank you for doing all that. Sometimes I'm like, man, I wonder what that's like to have defined ego. Yeah. Oh, it's kind of interesting, but I love my chart. So, yeah, don't make any promises. Don't try to will yourself to do anything. Willpower, consistency. You know, I'm going to do this diet for 6 months and not eat this or that. Yeah. I mean, I think that would be good to give yourself, like Alex always says, 80%, you know, do the best you can for that. But not to be hard on ourselves. We're not as good at something as we want to be, and continue that cycle of self-worth. And then also that other distorted, the self-importance crap, you know, yeah, we're all important, but if we try to put ourselves above other people in that way, which is different than authority, right? Authority is different. Okay. Like chemo, you're an authority on all your construction stuff, right? It's like, you know how to do that. We would need to go to you. You actually build the ark, right? And you don't have the 4037. But that's different than like, okay, I'm better than everybody, and like kind of having that energy. Authority is important to have like in the community as well. Okay. I had like a bunch of notes. Didn't go through any of them. Fine.
I really liked what you mentioned about the last one, the gate 51, because I have that in my design.
Cool.
And while you were mentioning it, I went through the book of lines, and I've got a 51.2.
Okay.
What it was explaining was like, it's like the gate of withdrawal.
Uh-huh.
Kind of noticed that a bit, like a lot of growing up, especially doing a lot of physical activities and being involved in like very physical sports. Like a lot of my friends just had really like, you know, the whole young testosterone driven, really aggressive. I never had that. And there was like certain times where I would be like feeling the urge to do things, but then it almost felt like I would always give up on things quickly if I knew that something wasn't possible. But when I was reading a bit about that particular line, the way that it breaks it down is that you have a good ability to judge the possibility of things. So it's more of a survival element where you don't, if you know that there's a larger, like they use the example of jumping across a cliff. You know, some people you can kind of amp them up and their ego gets involved and then they want to jump a cliff, but if they can't make it, they're going to die.
Right.
Whereas it kind of is that you have that ability to gamble and judge and predict things. So, you know, you don't kill yourself if you know that it's not something worthwhile. So I don't know, I just found that really interesting. It's giving me something that I'm going to dive into a little bit more because, yeah, you were really speaking a lot to me in that last little part about the 51 line.
Awesome. Yeah, that's really interesting. And, you know, again, anyone who has a 0.2 in any of your gates, the 0.2 is something that like you're natural at, right? They call it the natural, that it's part of your talent. It is projection, but not projected on, it's projecting out, right? So you're projecting out that energy. It's the hermit, right? So chemo, we're six twos, right? The 2 part is the hermit part. So yeah, whenever I see like a 0.2 like that, you can, as you're studying it, Josepha, you can kind of think of that too, because the 0.2 is always like the you're in your house painting a painting and you're naked and you don't know that people are looking in the window. Right. So it attracts people. They're like, what the heck are they doing? And they're interested in it because you're really good at doing that painting. You're really good, Joseph, at, absorbing shock and knowing like which initiations to go through and like, what to initiate and not initiate with like action, right? But like more of like a mystical sense and like new adventures. And it's a lot about geometry and direction, right? That channel. So yeah, it's kind of interesting. Nice. Thanks for sharing that. Chemo, did you have something you were going to say too?
Yeah, sorry. I was thinking earlier, I think when you were talking about the 40, that, we're kind of going through this time of this great awakening, right? Everyone's kind of waking up. Is that affecting the ego, all of the different gates differently now than it maybe did, 5 years ago, 10 years ago? Like, I feel like it's maybe coming in backwards, like the planet's vibrations raising. Maybe it's helping those that are awake to expose the ego and how it works, but we are, we're coming out of this whole material age and this whole egotistic age. Is that assisting some of us in recognizing how our ego's defined? Maybe?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So there's like false ego and then ego, right? So for the false ego, the ego and everything that's going on the planet right now with the mutation, with what's coming in, what's happening is that there's more fundamentalists coming in, right? So there's like that split, like people that are like going balls to the wall with whatever they're clinging to, whether it's like religion or politics, all those kind of things. So yeah, maybe the other people are kind of starting to see a lot of things like crumbling that are like, wait, just because like a bunch of people believe in that doesn't mean that we're going to keep going along with like societal programming, which is what the ego is. But yeah, I mean, as we've talked about, the major changes happening in the solar plexus, in the emotional center. One thing that may be affected coming up as well is that 4037, which is like how we keep communities together. Because the whole solar plex system is shifting and changing. So I'm interested to see how that's going to go. But yeah, I mean, as far as like people being able to see through false ego, yeah, maybe that's part of it. What's going on the planet right now, it's like exposure of everything. But again, the ego's not aware. So I don't know how that would really play into it. I just want to give you guys one more, I guess 2 more things. Okay. One thing I forgot was that the ego is developed in a fetus before the immune system. Weird. Because the ego is what actually constructs the immune system. Not sure if I mentioned that. And then, yeah, it's interesting because people that I know very close to me have like an ego configuration that I find really interesting. And I've noticed how like I was telling you guys about like the powerlessness. So even when we think of ego, it can also, just remember, it can also be like that other way. Like that's also a form of ego, which is not necessarily negative. I've been learning a lot about the powerlessness code. I believe it's the 21.3 in detriment. Well, 21.3, but then especially like if it's in detriment, which I know people in my life, like close with my mom has that. So I've actually been working on like clearing that out, because I know I've talked to you guys about like the melancholy and the darkness and like, woo, and I realize there's a lot of like imprint trauma stuff, so like if you ever look at your parents' charts, right, you can see things that's like, wow, I was like raised in this environment. Like, yeah, I don't have that exact code, but I can see the imprinting. And just like realizing how that code shows up and, just having awareness of it and stuff like that. So I've personally been working with like the powerlessness part, even though I think I've told you guys I have like the most arrogant line, the most aggressive line, the most self-conscious line, it's just a great combo. But yeah, it's interesting. I've got things that are like about strength and persevering, and I go through these waves with it, I'm like, all right, yeah, fuck this. I'm going to like conquer, my Pluto's the 28.6, the blaze of glory, taking a risk and like winning it all at the end, the game player. But I have to get through my 10.6 of self-consciousness first. But so I don't know, I'm just sharing with you guys, like, this is what I've been processing lately, like around the ego. So it's just all really fascinating to see that stuff. So yeah, maybe this week, just look at what gates you have in there. If you have a completely open ego, we didn't talk about this. Alex, yours is completely open. Okay, so if you have a completely open ego, or if you're around someone who has a completely open ego, remember the completely open ego, I just see it kind of like this purity. Again, even Ra talks about how the completely open centers, it's not our lesson in this life, right? But like we've already passed, even though it's not really like that. It's a really big source of confusion. Whenever I see a completely open center, I'm like, okay, this could be a big part of conditioning for you because there can be a lot of confusion around it. But once you know about it, then it's like one of your greatest gifts, right? So the completely open ego can be confusion around all those things we talked about, confusion about willpower, confusion around the material plane. What actually is this worth, right? So valuing things that aren't actually of that value, not valuing things that are actually of the right value, not knowing your own value, right? Confusion around what is self-worth, what is this or that. And again, the way that it shows up in a way that's not healthy is by initiating because of, well, I have to do this in order to prove that I am blah, 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 whatever it is. Confusion around money, confusion around commitment. So anywhere we have a completely open center, whatever those themes are, we just kind of let them move through and see how, what awareness we're getting from it, but not make a decision off of it, right? So even though the completely white centers are not our lesson in this life, that a lot of times is where we're initiating the most from, if we're not a manifester, right? Because of that confusion. So just wanted to share that. But the purity of it is really being able to see so much in the world around, agendas, like people's agendas, their intentions, who's actually going to do what they say they're going to do, what actually is ego, what's healthy, what's not healthy, and clearing out all those programs that we have around the false ego, right? So kind of playing the middle road, right? Not the left path, not the right path, the middle road. Like, what is a healthy ego? Like we need to accept our own egos, right? And the ego of others, and like starting to see it. That's why I really wanted to do this class today too, because there is a lot of misunderstanding around ego. So hopefully when we talk about it, we can be like, all right, the false ego and then ego mechanics, right? When we think of ego, heart center, ego mechanics. Okay, false ego, sometimes I call it ego identity. What's your ego identity? Oh, I'm really good at this and that, or I'm not, People make it an identity, which Ra talks about how the ego, we can't claim it. If you're trying to claim it, like, well, yeah, I have the 21 and I'm here to be the president and be in control of this or that. And look at what I did. That's, you're already in distortion. That's how we claim the ego, where it's like, no, okay, I have this sword and I'm protecting, and, it's not really me, it is me, but it's like part of my being. I'm not trying to like, yeah, look at me, I need a gold star. Review the ego this week. If you have any of the gates, read the gene keys of those, see how it shows up. What is your relationship with ego this week, right? Like, where are you seeing it, and where do you see the false ego, right? What does it bring up for you inside? What's your self-worth? Where are you making promises? What are these false obligations? Where are you trying to prove yourself? If it's undefined, all those kind of things. And let's try to take a week and just kind of work with that. Always telling yourself, if you have it undefined, I have nothing to prove. Now, if you have it defined, okay, I'm going to be in a round table, not a hierarchy, even though, yeah, I might have authority of this thing, but it's to serve and protect, right? Really, not corrupt. So, all right, go team. Let's do this.